Yes,
Yeah.
it's on.
Yes,
amazing. Nice to see you all here. This is Education, the Poets Bite Back. And my name is Aisling Fahey. This is Mark Grist and Jess Green, who I'm joined with today. So I am currently Young Poet Laureate for London, and that's a year's position funded by Spread the Word and the Legacy List. And what that means is that I do a series of residencies across London. They've been as diverse as the Free Word Centre, discovering about translation, and then I'm also doing one on the Olympic construction site. So I spent last week with 800 men going around building sites being like, "Hi, can you speak to me about a poem for 2 seconds?" Which went brilliantly. And I'm also doing workshops in schools and community centres. And the important thing for me this year was to really make it about broadening access to poetry, making it really accessible, and also challenging people's perceptions, challenging the fact that I, as a 21-year-old female, can do poetry as well, and so kind of challenging the perceptions of what it could be. And in schools, I want to open it up to make as many people as possible feel like they have a voice and that they can speak and that they can do what it is that we do, stand up on a stage and just tell our stories. So that's a little bit about me. I'll introduce the others in a little while. And I'm going to kick it off with a poem. Foreign Bodies. When a stranger pronounces my name right, I want to cut our ears off, dig for other sounds we share. There are names that I cannot pronounce. Each time, my tongue becomes a guilty weight. I score a tally on my thigh of all the countries I have not been to. I want to burrow far enough into your chest for me to strike your origins until they burst like oil from your open cavity. We love what is foreign because it reminds us of ourselves. I've spent my whole life with myself in varying states of consciousness. Still, I feel like I know so little about it. On the floor of a bathroom in a house whose owner I do not know. At a party I don't think I was invited to, I lie. Dressed as an angel, head spinning as if I'm on my way to heaven and the stars won't stop circling me. In 2 years, you will remind me how we first met. I will vow never to wear fancy dress again. I will think of how much our bodies shift in a year, how we grow into ourselves, like an orange being peeled in reverse, watching the rind reattach itself to the segments. My face is my parents' homeland. Sometimes they look at it and cry for all the things they've lost. Their lost things crawl under my skin. Look, there's the river we never did swim in. I don't know which one of them spots it. The vein by my temple, but by the time they turn around, the other one has long gone. Entombed in my face is what they built when they were in the business of making love and lives in foreign lands. My body is a passport. I've been using it to escape home. Men thumb it in the harsh light of liminal spaces, assessing its validity. When they return it to me, I run, as if the world is reverting to 1900 and there's only one plane journey left before everything becomes stay and stuck and black and white. Before the wall to the kitchen was knocked through, my sister and I would make hot chocolate the old school way. A saucepan, full fat milk, a non-electrical whisk. Like all rituals, we were learning to soothe hidden fears we had not yet learned how to name. We only got that ice cream because our home was falling down, and afters, at the top of Leighton High Road, did us cones for 99p, stuck a flake in for free. After our home fell down at the top of Leighton High Road, we were evicted creatures, all lung and socket, code and temper. We will try for many years to understand the different rage that festered in our bodies, even if they were made by the same creators, even if it did stem from the same falling brick. We talk in length of the middle child syndrome. I accept when you tell me I was younger, so it was different. I let you craft all of our unedited stories. You choose what photographs to show to guests. Whenever I need to forgive, I make hot chocolate. Drive the avalanche back up the mountainside until I am 8. I knew so much about forgiveness at 8. It was natural. It was necessary. Somebody says sorry, and you say, it's okay, even if they hurt you real bad. What use is it to carry other people's pain in your chest? I think I knew myself best at 8. I knew I didn't want to kill the spiders, even though I was afraid of them. Went to bed imagining giant tarantulas lurking on the landing, waiting for me to sleep before making a dwelling of my mouth. Grab me by whatever hair follicle tastes most like your own. Really, we are acrobats. Really, we have danced in every land, moored the moons of Jupiter to our belted dresses. Really, all it would have taken was a simple stutter of the earth for me to have been given your name. Thank you. I would now like to introduce to you Mark Grist, who is a Peterborough-based writer, performer, and educational consultant. He had a video that went completely viral, which involved him in a rap battle with MC Blizzard. If you haven't seen it, please go home and watch it. It's got 4 million hits on YouTube. And he has performed on BBC Radio 1, Radio 6 Music, BBC 2, ITV, and BBC 3. Please welcome Mark Grist.
Cool. Hello. Hello, can we hear me? Hi, my name's Mark. I have a really weird job. Yeah, I'm a spoken word artist. It means I kind of travel all over the place, and I read poems to people. And a lot of young people that I work with are often kind of interested, in whether I can live doing that, whether I can make enough money. I know a lot of young people these days, more than ever, I think, are really kind of focused on economics. So I spend most of my time at the moment talking to people about that, and I say, well, there's 2 things I suppose that people should be aware of my poetry, is that I don't when I'm in schools, but a lot of my poems for adults swear. I apologise, I have swears in. And a lot of my poems, I'm quite interested in restraint within writing. So I thought I'm going to read you 2. You can have a choice. Would you rather have, swears or restraint? Okay, we're going for swears. There's about 4 people in the audience right now going, I'm not happy with this. All right, cool. This is a poem. I've not read it before, right? I've just written it today. I write a lot of pieces. So I say to students, I need to make money, right? So I write commissions for people all the time and different things. And my work on YouTube helps me get a fan base, which then means that people pay me for specific commissions or whatever. I got asked to do one the other day for a teacher. Basically, this guy contacted me. His fiancée was a teacher, and she liked what I wrote. And he said, could you write a piece about how frustrating it is being a teacher, but ultimately rewarding? But she really likes swearing, so can you swear as well? So I basically do think this is my job, right? So this is called Still the Kids Don't Give a Shit, and it goes like this. You try to plan for everything. You smile each day, you let them in. You tell them they're intelligent, and still the kids don't give a shit. You head away reflecting that you'll fix it. In your lesson plans, no filler, no digressions, and yet still the kids don't give a shit. You start to worry, ask for help, you take on the advice, replay days they weren't engaged in fitful dreams throughout the night. You seem to spend most of your time applying words of wisdom to lesson plans more lengthy than Apple's terms and conditions, and you make displays, start laminating, apply for extra IT training hours at the copier waiting, still the kids don't give a shit. That role play that you thought was fun, that really moving scene that's from that movie that you loved when young, well, still the kids don't give a shit. You purchase books with stocky headings, try to make sure fun's embedded, differentiate your questions, chuck in the odd TOWIE reference, coax them out of disagreements, celebrate each small achievement, pin their work from floor to ceiling, but each week you can't believe it. Not one of the, nothing changes, nothing shifts, till deep inside you something flips. You turn and say, right, listen kids, I've spent whole terms amassing failure. I've been warden, fused with entertainer, chat show host, lion tamer, farting scissors, shitting paper. I studied this. I worked for ages for dull looks from lifeless teenagers. Look, I could throw a hand grenade and no one here would give a shit. And they'll just sit there, silent, stare right back. While pain shoots up, your knees go slack. It seems you're having a heart attack and still the kids don't give a shit. But what's that? There, right in your pocket. A little wrapped up piece of chocolate. Why, look how they stare upon it. Oh shit, they give a shit. Oh, it's okay, guys. Don't call for help. Just work through questions 6 to 12. This goes to whoever does it well. Oh my, they give a shit. While you do that, I'll just lie down. I feel a little tired now, but keep it up. I'm really proud. They're really, really doing it. Cool. Thank you very much. Cheers. Woo! Thank you. So that's what I do, right? And normally students go, so you get paid for that? And you're like, well, yeah, sometimes. Like, essentially, my job is like negotiating with people and then finding interesting things to kind of write about things. I've been fascinated by poetry, right? A lot of the time when I was at school, no one ever told me that I could do this as a job. And I spend a lot of my time basically trying to do that, trying to tell young people that basically, if you find something you love and you can get paid for it, that's all you need, right? That's all you need to do. And I really enjoy what I'm doing. I'll read you a piece, one more piece. You can either choose, you can either have the letter E, right, or murder. Like, it's your choice in this one. I don't know what else to say. Have we got hands up for the letter E? Okay, quite a few fans. Hands up for murder. All right, cool, we'll go with murder. All right, I wrote this. Actually, I'm really pleased to read this to you, right? I wrote this because 2 years ago, we had a situation where the Oxford Professor of Poetry went up in front of tons of students and announced that he thought Carol Ann Duffy, a current National Poet Laureate, was the Mills and Boon of poetry, right? And I think there's a lot going on there. I think there's gender in that, for a start. I think it's our first female laureate. I don't think he would have said that about Andrew Motion. But I think that there's this idea of policing your patch. That's what he said after. He said, I was policing my patch. And I think this tradition, basically, it's not policing your patch, it's being a dickhead, right, to people. And I think that poetry has got a very rich heritage of people being unpleasant to each other in poetry. Alfred Lord Tennyson, our very first poet laureate, he didn't publish any of his work for 10 years of his life because other people slated it so much, other poets said so much bad stuff. He's amazing. And you know, we young people always face like kind of regular criticism, you know, YouTubers and comment boards, and it's intense. And I thought, well, I would try and explore this myself. The main reason was because I went to a poetry gig with loads of teachers at a teacher training event, and bizarrely for a teacher training event, as I was performing, I saw like 2 teachers passing notes at the back of the room. And it was a male teacher passing a note to a female teacher. As we cleared the room, I read the note. It said he said, what are you doing after this? She said, I don't know. And he said, do you want to go to the pub? And she said, maybe. And then he said, this guy isn't very good, is he? Right? And she said, he's not that bad. Which I'll take, right? And then he said, he's not exactly Tennyson, is he? And I thought, he wouldn't pub. And I was like, right, fine, I've got everything I need. So this is my other piece. It goes like this. Every writer I know has a mind that's polluted, with voices that tell them their work is all useless. Like a virus inside them, they thrive on defeat, but they wouldn't stop one man, a man they called Keith. Now, Keith was a poet. At least he wrote every month. And he read what he wrote, although most of it stunk. It was turgid at best. Every word as it left would just twirl in the air like a turd in a dress. And you'd think that with Keith, that voice that's inside him would have beefed up somewhat. A critical Viking. That wasn't the case, though. See, Keith wasn't frightened. He weren't a great writer, just really liked writing. And so each month in the bar with the mic in the corner, they'd slump as he started reciting this torture, dishing out words like a toilet that's blocked. The image is shitty, the rhyme's badly forced, and although they all dread it, every week he still read it, pulling metaphors like teeth without any anaesthetic. It was painful, all right? And while his work offered no joy, it did worse than that. It pissed off the old boys. See, because Keith was well known, and his name was like venom to the old boys who moaned that he just didn't get it. I mean, what is he trying? Where is the relevance? Why bother doing it? It seems hardly Tennyson. It was a well-trod routine. It had gone on for ages. But one evening, Keith brought out a handful of pages, and he started to read, and the room became flat. Because even for Keith, what Keith read was quite bad. And the old boys all stared. They watched on in silence. It was bad, really bad. Something grew up inside them. They started to shake as though channeling demons. There's no rhyme, shuddered one. Dear God, there's no reason. That night they sat down, dissected the problem. Keith's work was so bad they had to do something, but what? I mean, what? Nothing's stopping this guy. You can't put him off just by rolling your eyes or refusing to clap at the end of a recital. It would take more resolve. It would take something final. So they agreed to a plan in the depths of their cloister. There was only one option. That option was Moida. The next open mic, Keith started reciting. The old boys were armed, huge bag stacked behind him. He started his piece, and as he hit his stride, their arms darted down, clasped round what's inside, and in seconds, they set to removing his grin. Each tomato they threw still held deep in the tin. It was a shocking amount to take on the chin, on the shoulder, the temple, the teeth. As the cans hammered hard, he collapsed in a heap, and the old boys, they cheered with each thud on his flesh, and the cans they piled up until poor Keith was dead. The next open mic came. There was no Keith. Delight reigned. The old boys felt great, like they'd banished a migraine. Other poets, more nervous, sort of raised up their standards. Their poems were good, like the best that they'd managed. As the night drew to a close, and Newreed ventured to read her first piece about senile dementia. As she stumbled away through her thoughts on her dad, the old boys all gasped. It was nearly as bad. I mean, yeah, it was more honest, but the mess was all led by a rhyme, trying to cram in a metaphor. They reached for the cans, threw double hard, and they cheered as they sprayed bits of brain on the bar. The following day, they stood at her funeral. One read a piece. It was really quite beautiful. In the light of the day, it seemed right for this judgment. Who best to shield words and those longest incumbent? They pull out the weeds, stop new ones from growing. Yes, poetry's a standard in need of upholding. And so each month they held cans throughout everyone's verse, and they pelted each poet whose poems are worst. And with those going on, facing death on the mic, 20 poets became 12, became 8, became 5. And the numbers soon dwindling, the newbies to bludgeon the old boys in time had to turn on each other. One night, one of them messed up a stanza before he could argue. They threw home the cans, and another one evening, as he went to his kitchen, was greeted with, James, your work has been slipping. One was always judged worst, no matter how hard they tried. So even they started dropping like flies, another one dead, another one dead. Every fudge line meant a can to the head, until finally one day there was just one poet left. And the standard was high. From start through to finish, though the open mic lasted just a handful of minutes, but he didn't feel bad. No weight of the murder, the blood in his hands. He thought, I'll go a stage further. Why give up on this mighty work we've begun? Why have all of my poems? Because you only need one. Yeah, one single poem. Surely that is the answer. No way anything could lower that standard, and he laughed to himself as he knew that he meant it. Went home, burned his pieces. The purge was intensive, and standing in front of a mirror, quite pensive, he brained himself hard till his head was indented. And that was that. Poetry was safe and removed from all failings, and lofty and great and lonely and empty and lacking in meaning. Removed from us sinners just to rot on the ceiling. And I wonder sometimes if that's what we're craving. When I see and hear artists obsessed with their slating, because hating each other seems dumb, and I'm guessing we'd stop if we saw down the route that we're heading. I say here's to each poet who mucks up a piece, who fucks their work up, still doesn't retreat. Because if you ask me, if we're craving more Tennysons and Keats, it's just as important that we cheer on the Keiths. Cool. Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
So the next poet, the last time I shared a stage with her, we were in Glastonbury. So we were just in the middle of a massive field, and I was in wellies, and it was wonderful. So Jess Green, you may have seen her video that also went viral called Dear Mr. Gove. 300,000 hits on YouTube. She's performed at Glastonbury Latitude Festival Secret Garden Party, and she is currently touring Burning Books, which is her new show, set in an inner city state school. So Jess Green, everybody.
Hey.
Cool, hello. I'm Jess. So I work as a poet, similarly to Mark. I go into a lot of schools, and I do kind of creative writing and poetry workshops and things. I'm about to tour my show Burning Books, which is set in a secondary school. And I was writing it last year, and one of the pieces that I wrote was addressed to the then Education Secretary, and I felt that having sat in a lot of staff rooms and talked to a lot of teachers, I kind of wanted to write something for a lot of those teachers who I had spoken to, and a lot of things they kind of told me about. And I realise now, kind of, since then, the Tories have called him toxic and given him the boot and everything. But I think that a lot of that, those issues, still stands just because he's gone. Those issues are still there. So I thought I would do this poem for you. I think I mentioned in my performance earlier, I woke up this morning feeling horrific, I've got the worst cold, so I'm really dosed up on paracetamol and stuff, but you may have to bear with me a little bit. Cool, so this is Dear Mr. Gove. It's Thursday morning and I can't feel my fingers, but I'm burning through the numbness with rage for the scabs outside. And on his way in, that jumped-up new thing in PE, only here on work experience, stopped to say to me, oh, come on, Janine, it's not 1983. Picket lines mean nothing but frumpy-faced lefties waving copies of The Guardian over bins. And then he went in. I could be his mother. Stuff that would probably be his grandmother. So still on this line I have drawn between them and us, I am making a mental list of all the people you should have heard of before you're allowed to step foot in the public sector. Arthur Scargill, Harvey Milk, Rosa Parks, Emily Pankhurst, God, even bloody Joan of Arc. And I'll set a picture of you, Mr. Gove, as the background on my phone, all pressed up and pouting at the screen, glaring your dead eyes at me. Because there are sometimes on Friday's period 5 with 45 minutes left to go and not one member of Year 11 has taken off their coats and they don't seem to know they have got 6 weeks left until their final exams. And this really is their last chance. They have ballsed it up every step until here, and when I try and engage them in rational discussion about this problem, they say they don't care. Why would they? I don't blame them. Not when you lot in power got to their families 3 generations ago, divided and conquered, belittled and humiliated until no family on that street was left with work or a pension or one outfit to get up and go. It's on those days, Mr. Gove, when I remove myself from the classroom, take a minute in the stationery cupboard alone and scream through my teeth at your stupid face on my phone, 4 levels of fucking progress. And if it was just this one class, and it'd be a breeze, but this is 5 lessons a day, 13 different classes a week, that is 325 pairs of eyes that I have to drag through your Dark Ages dated curriculum. And some of those are bright-eyed. They are keen as hot chips, and they are a pleasure to teach. But the ones whose eyes are glazed from the start, they're falling asleep at the front of my class, and well, Michael, I could sing and I could dance, but trying to get a kid to find a list of every monarch since the 14th century entertaining would tax every member of One Direction, surrounded by flamethrowers, projecting the faces of Henry VIII's wives into the sky. I mean, we could use our pupil premium funding to get Harry Styles in. Pay for him to have your more patriotic account of World War I tattooed across both arse cheeks. It wouldn't make anyone feel more enthusiastic about teaching this. And thank you for the Bibles, Mr. Gove, but I don't think it's God we need right now. I would like you to stop opening the doors of my profession onto unqualified graduates who are unsure of their prospects and can no longer afford that self-discovery voyage to Bali, so have decided on a whim they'll turn their hands to teaching. I mean, how hard can it be? And I wouldn't mind if they've ever stepped foot in a classroom before. I would help them carry their desk charts and optimistic wall planners through the door. But when shell-shocked war heroes are being told that the road to recovery is 2 paracetamol and class 10B, it's no wonder that our headlines seem to follow similar themes recently. And I would like Hayley, whose dad incidentally walked out on her for the 10th time last week to get 1 ounce of credit for her speaking and listening. Spelling has never been her strong point, and sometimes she struggles to strengthen her argument with structure and paragraphs, but if you just gave her a little more time to look over her coursework and redraft, she might actually stand a chance. It is not cheating, Mr. Gove, it is editing, and I am sure War and Peace would have been a very different book without at least 1 glance over. And I know your mates grew up learning Latin and are worried that if us on the ground don't start drilling it in, then it will become extinct, a Cinderella language of the elite left in a history book on the shelf. But when you have got to get Year 7, who collectively already speak 11 languages, to grasp hold of Spanish and to get to grips with the perfect tense in 6 weeks when you only see them for 4 hours a fortnight. Yes, it was meant to be 9, but the lower level ones are off to English and maths intervention, and the gifted and talented are having a raising aspirations speech about getting into Cambridge, so you are left with the ones in the middle, sitting there, looking at you. Know that they are nothing more than distinctly average. It's hard work, Mr. Gove. I wish you could know. Because I'm trying to empathise with that chip on your shoulder that you never made it to Eton. You never got to learn the slang or chase the new boys down the corridor, whipping them with wet towels. And I'm sorry that the only incriminating photo of you in the media wasn't with a prostitute on your lap and coke up your nose, but on a picket line in Aberdeen with other beardy, normal-looking blokes. I am seeing things from your side, and honestly, I sympathise. But now try seeing them from mine. The sun's going down, leaving the school in darkness, and we're going home, passing cars, carrying passengers who are done for the day, can put their work out their heads, open a bottle, talk to their partners, we sit up marking, give our own kids enough attention to fend off the guilt, then open our planners, work out who is not making progress fast enough, write a list and action plans for each kid who just doesn't seem to get it, despite lessons to suit every learning style, revision sheets, summaries, break time meetings, resources, catch-ups, one-to-ones, phone calls home, and finally, there's a last straw. That clip from Blackadder, just to try and get them to remember what the trenches were for. If, despite all of this, they still don't get it, not only do we feel like we have failed, but we do not go up the pay scale. We don't get that bit extra we were going to put towards a holiday, and you probably think we don't deserve that anyway, but God, you just tried doing this 7 days a week, 18 hours a day. Yes, the weekends we're not teaching, but with the workload it feels much the same. And if, after 40 years of this, you want to take my pension away, leaving me no choice but to carry on till I'm 78 when I barely know my own name, until I just drop dead in front of class 7A. Well, Mr. Gove, even if I am the only one on this picket line, I will be the one standing in your way. Cool, thank you. Cool, thank you, look, thank you, that's really nice. I'm just going to do one more poem. I very rarely do these two side by side, but I very rarely have the sort of indulgence of being able to perform to people who are as interested in education as I am. So I know that I'm talking to people who already know about this, but remember that I usually am talking to people who don't. So before Gove was kind of reshuffled, he made some key changes to the English curriculum. So he kind of changed the books that kids read when they get to GCSE level, and he got rid of anything that wasn't American, that wasn't British, and wasn't written like over 100 years ago, and replaced it with stuff that was. So we lost like books like To Kill a Mockingbird and A View from the Bridge and Of Mice and Men and The Crucible, and without wanting to be kind of melodramatic about it, books, if you're going to read them, like you should read them when you're 15. That's kind of when they're kind of most important. So I didn't do anything about it, I just kind of wrote a poem about it. This is called Curriculum 451. They're the clowns in the closet and the whispering beasts under the beds. They speak of liberation in the darkness and uprising through the night. They're the lips next to kids' ears at Monday morning bus stops and the hands held in the shadowiest corners of prison cells. Take them away. Keep the gallery sat down when Scout Finch's father passes, sweep their feet from under them and let the mob get him. Give the shyest boy in period 4 no inkling he could be much more than this, the underdog that keeps the bullies back with compassion and questioning. Because I once saw a year 10 throw his copy of Mice and Men out the window because he couldn't handle what was happening to the gentle hero in the first book he'd ever managed to navigate all the way through alone. It wasn't fair. But it's not that you're scared of, is it, Michael? That kids will get so wrapped up in the honesty and the hurt of those deep South American words. No, it's the fear they'll take a little too much and the fight backers. That they'll find the drive of the downtrodden guy and the hint of revolution at the end of chapter 5, the whisper of try harder. So give them Dickens to harden their fire, and other books they are too young and lacking in life experience to truly empathise with, because when you're 14, you know the things you feel. The anger and the unfairness of it all, the unabashed passion for the girl who has all the answers and the heart-wrenching hurt that she never has any words for you in the lunch queue. The stuff that makes you sick and ball up your fists or makes that primal laugh escape with Pepsi Max up your nose and all over your mate's face. Not whether Wilkins McCorber has done his accounts correctly this month. But teach them to keep their stiff-lipped mouths shut, to put that gun back on the wall and drag that flea bit of misery off the floor, force that nameless dog to carry his carcass of half-heartedness around a little more, then stop that iron fist from further causing any damage, give a small, snivelling, chip-shouldered man his day of dignity. Tell me, Michael, did you just find a little too much of yourself in Curly? So give them safe stories. whose own authors recoil from being held up against the likes of Miller and Steinbeck and Lee, grind them down with bleak Dickensian workhouses and a backbone that knows hard work until their bones run so solid with patriotism they are sick to the back teeth of English and drop it at 16. Burn out the writers of the next generation, so lacking in fiery, fierce imagination, they keep it locked up and under wraps, sitting in offices working out somebody else's maths to make ends meet, because what they learnt in school was that facts, not fiction, make you a real career. It's figures and swivel chairs and desktop computers, not the burning at the back of your brain when Scout first spots a figure in the corner of the room. Hey, boo. No. They won't know that urgent dread when we can see the end before Lenny, and we want everything to change its course, but our teachers take us by our hands and lead us with fingers on triggers, teaching us for the first time the message that it isn't always black and white. Like when poverty locks communities into downward spirals and we demonise crimes of not having enough, it isn't always black and white. But you'll fix that by saying publicly that 90% of teenagers studying of mice and men is a disappointing statistic. You'll fix that by giving them Middlemarch over the Crucible to get their teeth around. Silence the sound of one man standing up and saying he rejects the rights of those in power to determine his actions, then put Theresa on our borders and turn back all the hopeful international students. Keep British books for the British in the fear that a few Romanian novels might move in next door. Protect your nationally centred curriculum from the naysayers, the chairs of boards, education experts, senior lecturers, Mark Gatiss. And on a particularly rainy day, when the 99% around you and all your mates up too much, twist the hate a little harder and make the distance between literature and prison cells a little wider. Claim incentives and benefits, reformation and rehabilitation, just to calm the quaking of your nerves when somebody mentions the power of education. Cool, thank you.
Great.
So let's jump right in. You both had videos that went completely viral, and I just want to know, what was the response from the teaching community, and also any of the young people that you were going into? Were they aware of these videos?
Go on, you first.
Okay. I suppose I went viral for like rap battling, which I kind of, at the time, I was doing pretty secretly because you can get in trouble for that. My head teacher knew about it, like my year 9 students knew about it, and so did a couple of the members of the English department. To be honest, I'd already left teaching, so it was all pretty good, although the national press tried to interview, they turned up at the school and tried to interview kids through the gates and stuff. They were hoping for a story that I'd been disciplined or something for kind of being so badly behaved as a rap battle. But no, it's been cool. I see loads of my ex-students, they're really pumped about everything I'm doing now. Actually, bizarrely, a lot of students I used to work with and we used to have a hip-hop club with, I'm very proud of them, but they're much more proud of me now. They tell people that they taught me everything I know. So they're quite up for it, really.
And Jess, what about the teachers then, when you released Dear Mr. Go?
I think for me, I had lots and lots of teachers that kind of got in touch with me. I wasn't expecting the poem to get any of the amount of hits that it did, but then I wasn't expecting teachers to get in touch with me, and I had a lot of teachers that said that it really a lot of the themes and it kind of really resonated with them. I think the real thing that I wasn't expecting that was heartbreaking was the emails that were coming in the middle of the night, and I was getting emails at 3 a.m. from teachers who were saying, and there were hundreds of these teachers that were saying they were on their knees with the pressure and how difficult it was, and there were lots of teachers who said that they were too young to be able to retire but too old to be able to go and do anything else, and that they were so fed up of kind of in this job where no one understood the pressures of it, and then everywhere you look there's a real blame culture where teachers just get blamed for everything, and if you moan about it, well, stop moaning, you get the holidays. And it was those emails that came in the middle of the night that were really kind of heartbreaking. I think in terms of kids, occasionally kids are did you do that Michael Gove video? But then they're like, who's Michael Gove? So, yeah, I don't know really.
And in that last poem, you were talking about, obviously, all the changes that have happened to the English curriculum. And To Kill a Mockingbird, that was my book. I loved that so much. And what do you think about the direction that the arts is taking within schools?
I've been working kind of in schools as a poet for the past 5 years, so not that long, and I've only worked in schools under a Tory government, but it seems to me that this government just seemed to really not like the arts. I mean, I remember like Gove talking about like high value GCSEs, as though like some GCSEs had carried more weight than others. And the high value GCSEs were like STEM subjects. And then there's things like, you know, Nikki Morgan saying about, she was at that launch for the campaign to get more kids to study STEM subjects, which obviously is really important. It's brilliant, we should be doing that. But at the same time, she just wrote off arts and humanities and said that, you know, you will be held back if you do an arts or humanities subject. And then she's now decided that she's going to track kids right up into like when they get jobs and stuff and work out how much tax they pay, just to really prove that if you do an arts subject, well, you won't earn enough money. And it's just this whole kind of feeling that arts subjects aren't as important. And I think when schools, in terms of budgets, are being asked to pay for more and more stuff, like I know like secondary schools now have to pay for like the work experience provision, which they didn't have to, and like the careers provision, and they are being asked to pay more legal fees and their HR provision and that sort of stuff. The things that go first are like the after-school arts club and the yearly show and that kind of thing. And I know from my experience of going in and being like, the poet's here to do the creative writing workshop, and so many teachers are like, I appreciate that you're here, but at the same time, I've got to get this kid a C. Like, and if you're taking them out of my lesson to do your poetry workshop, then I think there's so much pressure that there's no time for those kind of like extra arts stuff.
Yeah, I find that I get an increasing number of people requesting bookings now from like private schools. And what I worry about is, I feel like the last few years, there's almost been like a imposing of class divide like across our education system. So I get some like heads of English or whatever from schools will bring me in. Those heads of English, obviously very different people, but they all have the same kind of characteristics. They're all very driven and they fight for their budgets and they fight to put things on that seem to be seen as luxuries almost. Since they've been kind of removing things like speaking and listening as well, particularly, there's no ability to use those kind of budgets. At the same time, I get loads of bookings, and lots of other poets get people asking for bookings from private education institutions where people have got money and they can pay for people to come in. And what I worry about is that we're getting like a two-tier system where some people are getting exposed to outside artists, and it has a huge impact, like a massive impact. But why should it just be poets? Do you know what I mean? Like, you should have like a whole range of people you can get in. And the only schools I'm finding I'm getting to go to these days, increasingly, are schools where the head of English is like a bit of a firebrand, basically, like with SLT, and really fights for their money.
Yeah, because my experience of getting into poetry, and the reason that I am doing this work now, is because my school probably took a massive risk, probably took some of their budget and bought into a poetry programme. So it was the London Teenage Poetry Slam. My school was based in East London, and they brought poets in. It was this whole programme where we were able to work with professional poets, write, really find our voices, and you know, yes, that is definitely considered a risk. But so then when we all go into schools and run these workshops and work with the children, how do you try to engage them within poetry? What tools do you use?
I think that for me, like, I mean, it's interesting, and you know, it's really interesting that you go into primary schools and you're like, here's the poet, and they're like, oh, I love poetry, yeah. And then something happens between year 6 and year 7, and you go into year 7, you're like, here's the poet, and they're like, I hate poetry. So, and I think that a lot of that is, I think that the secondary curriculum, particularly sort of like from year 9 onwards, the poems they have to study, I think teachers are very restricted with what they can do with poetry with kids, and I think that a lot of the poems that they study are very difficult to relate to if you're kind of 14 years old. I mean, you know, I like lots of poets now, kind of traditional poets now, that I definitely wouldn't have liked when I was 14, and I think that performance poetry is good because it can be something. I'm really keen when I go into schools to not be like, I can teach poetry better than you because I'm a poet, like, and I think that it should be more that poetry, performance poetry is a good kind of gateway to get kids hooked into poetry. So, you know, if you can help a kid see the way that, you know, Kate Tempest is angry in this poem, and you feel her anger and frustration, well, that's very similar to Wilfred Owen's anger and frustration in this poem. And if you can kind of use it as a gateway in that way, then I think it's a real kind of a support to the English curriculum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like going in. I work a lot on a range of things. I think when I go in, what I like about it is that because I was a teacher for 5 years, and I was saying exactly the same things I'm saying now, but it was like, oh, yeah, whatever, sir. Like, you know, like the same old stuff. But the fact you're not wearing a suit and you're just coming in and going, actually, I'm an actual real person. I don't live in that cupboard like you imagine your teacher does. But I actually really think poetry is really important. Like, that's really exciting, and that's really, really cool when you can do that and talk to people about poetry, and also get young people to realise that it's not just written by loads of dead guys, right? Like, it's actually, like, and people didn't just write it to be analysed. I love the, you know, Poetry Live. I love the moment that you get to go and see poets explain why they wrote something. That's really cool. I tend to use restraints. What I find is that you get loads of people, right, I think, try and sell you. I found this when I was teaching. They try and sell me loads of tech and like loads of stuff on how to like get my kids to be more creative and more inventive and stuff. And you're like, you don't need any of that. Like, all you actually need is the idea of restrictions and restraints. It can be as simple as saying, you have got 2 minutes to write me 4 lines on this image. You've got, the idea of restricting restraint is really important. If anyone's interested in it, check out the Oulipo, right? They're a mainly French group of writers. I use these guys all the time. They've never let a British member join them. They've never let a woman join them either, which is, like, to be honest, is great in a classroom because it gets everyone fired up. And we're like, right, we're going to show these guys. But they've never let a British member join them at all, and they write purely with restraints, such as you're only allowed to use 1 vowel for the duration of this piece of writing, or you're only allowed to use kind of like, you choose a certain number of letters and you have to use those to make your writing. Their restraints are fantastic, really exciting, and I think that the crux of it is if you give someone a restriction or a limitation, that's all rhyme is really. You're not saying the best possible thing at that point in time, you're fitting with a rhyme scheme. By restricting and limiting, I think you get people to be creative, and that's all it is.
So we've got a couple more minutes. Just want to ask one more question and then I'll open it up. In the rise of people such as Kate Tempest, as you mentioned before, George the Poet, Scroobius Pip, that are kind of combining a lot of things. They're doing plays, they're doing music, poetry. Have you seen a change in attitude with the children, the students? Are they aware of those artists? And is that impacting upon their relationship with poetry?
I think so. I think, to be honest, they're ahead of the curve. Like, essentially, they are the ones who are consuming all of this and are getting excited by artists like this, and some teachers are starting to kind of wake up to it and know what's going on. But I think for a lot of teachers, I mean, I think we get paid a lot of time to go into schools because sometimes the idea of understanding modern poetry and what's going on, it's a bit like me trying to understand football teams, right? From this point, there's so many, it just seems like too much going on. And actually, it's not that complex, and a lot of, if you ask your students in your classroom, if you're an English teacher, your students probably know more spoken word artists than you do. Like, I think that's, they're really into it at the moment.
I mean, I think that's quite interesting. I mean, I think there is a bit of a divide between, because like whenever I come to like London or Manchester or Birmingham, and you know, does anyone know any like spoken word artists? And it's like Kate Tempest, Holly McNish, George the Poet. But then, like, I live in Leicester, so, like, I go into schools in Leicester. Does anyone know, like, any performance poets? And they're like, what's performance poetry? And I think there is a real divide between those kind of bigger cities that have kind of, you know, poets more likely to go there and perform, and there's maybe a lot more going on. And then you go to some of the smaller cities, and it's amazing that they just think the poetry is this thing that's in a book, and, like, soldiers used to write it. And that's it. But actually, that can be a really nice thing when you go into a school and you first show them some performance poetry, and being there to be like the person to kind of show them something and see them discovering that it's not just old dead guys is really nice. Like, it's lovely to have that feeling. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Right, we've got time for one question. So is it right in the front row? Yes? I don't know if we have mics, so just shout at me. Yeah.
First of all, I really, really enjoyed your poetry review. We don't really know what the political landscape is going to be. There's a bit of instability. And even if the Labour government do come in, we don't know how they're going to change things. How can you as poets counteract the damage that they have done to the education of all these young people?
So for anyone who didn't hear, there's changing governments. How can we as poets help the damage that has been done through all of the shifting political parties?
Well, I mean, a range of ways, I suppose. We were talking earlier about how, like, being a spoken word artist is very much like being a politician. It's just you've got a very liberal line, essentially. Like, you're trying to focus on kind of like liberal values in most instances. I think spoken word artists who I think who are changing the system are spoken word artists who are trying to connect directly with young people and people en masse. So I think utilising new technology, things like YouTube, SoundCloud, trying to get work out there, trying to find a way. I think the issue we've got is that poetry, spoken word is, you know, part of the huge kind of partly crumbling on one side kind of like castle of poetry, I think. And I think the more people that can actually start to try and connect with an audience and find new ways to connect with an audience, the more chance we have of having a voice and getting people to express themselves. I'd like there to be less infighting within the world of poetry and more kind of...
And also I think it's that thing of just as much as it's about teaching the poetry that's been written, what we all love to do is to actually say, here are the skills, here is how you can write your own poetry, here is how you can express yourself. So I think it is about, you know, because that tool of expression, no matter what is going on in the wider world, in politics, that's a tool of you actually getting to grips with what you think about it as a young person and being able to express that. So I think that's really important as well. That's all we've got. Jess, do you want to quickly comment? Sorry.
No, I don't really have anything to add. Yeah, I think you know, poetry is one of these things that can be, if used in the right way, you know, it can be used as sort of like a political tool. I think it's, you know, you look back at sort of, you know, protest songs in the 1960s. I think that if you have something that gives a voice to a group of people who feel like they are voiceless, then it's a good way to kind of galvanise people and kind of get a message out. And I think that it's also kind of not about not being kind of selfish with your art form as well, and actually getting out there and helping young people to kind of like write stuff that they believe in and to get their own message out and that sort of thing.
A beautiful note to end on. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.